Good morning everyone. So today we are going to discuss WTO, that is World Trade Organization. So apart from WTO, we are going to discuss GATT, G-A-T-T, that is General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. Now what is WTO? It is World Trade Organization. World Trade Organization. World Trade Organization. Okay, first thing first, GATT. GATT. So as we have discussed, GATT is General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. Trade and Tariff. It is a general agreement. It was negotiated through Geneva Treaty of 1946. Now, one thing that should be noted, that it was negotiated in the background of Second World War. World War II. That is why it was mostly dominated by developed nations. And developing countries were not given due representation. That means adequate representation. Due representation. Okay. So this was GATT. Now WTO is a successor of GATT. So GATT came through Geneva Treaty in 1946. GATT had certain inherent issues, and to address those issues, WTO came into picture. WTO is World Trade Organization. So first and foremost issue was of representation. That means in case of GATT, developed countries dominated and developing countries were not given due representation. Here in WTO negotiations, developing plus developed played a key role in the negotiation. Okay. Apart from that, GATT was negotiated in the 1946. So obviously at that point of time, the focus was on agriculture and textiles. So after say 40-50 years, the problem was that it did not give due attention to services and issues like IPR. What is IPR? It is intellectual property. Intellectual property rights. What is intellectual property? It means a creation of mind. Okay. Another problem with GATT was that it was a mere agreement and it lacked institutional structure. institutional structure. What does that mean? That means it was just an agreement, as the name suggests, and it did not provide any institution for that. Now this problem was addressed when WTO came into picture. What is O? O stands for organization. So it led to establishment of an institution. And because of this institution, the dispute resolution mechanism became easier in case of WTO, and it was a major problem in case of GATT. Okay, so let me simplify it. GATT, Geneva Treaty of 1946, less representation, of developing nations, the main focus was on agriculture and textiles, and areas like services, IPR, they were neglected. Apart from that, it lacked strong dispute resolution mechanism. Apart from that, GATT lacked institutional structure. Because of these problems, a new agreement was negotiated, and that led to formation of WTO, World Trade Organization. First thing first, it was negotiated after Uruguay round of 1995. Again, it had wider representation, Apart from that, it also gave focus to services, IPR, etc. Then it provided dispute resolution mechanism. It also provided a platform for further negotiations. Via institutional structure. So, with this we have covered what is GATT, what is WTO, what were the issues related to GATT, and how WTO tried to address those issues. Okay, now we are going to discuss the significance of WTO. Or trade principles of WTO. So first and foremost, WTO, that is World Trade Organization, focus on non-discrimination. It means countries should not discriminate when it comes to trade. So member countries or the countries which are the members of WTO, they should not discriminate in terms of trade. Two major components of non-discrimination are most favored nation, MFN, that is most favored nation, and second is national treatment. Okay. Now, most favored nation means if suppose there is a country A or A1, if it is giving special treatment to C1, then this country will have to give the same treatment to rest of the WTO members, for example C2, C3 and so on. That means if you are giving special treatment or favoritism treatment to one nation, you will have to extend those benefits to the rest of the members. So this is most favored nation. Second component is national treatment. National treatment means the domestic entities will be given the same treatment as foreign entities. That means there should not be any discrimination among them. So these are the two components of non-discrimination. Apart from that, WTO also focus on transparency, it focus on predictability, fair competition, it also focus on economic reforms, and development. Economic reforms and development. So we have discussed what is non-discrimination. Transparency means the decisions are taken or the tariff barriers or any other barriers are imposed in a transparent manner. They are not decided haphazardly. Predictability means the decisions are taken in a similar direction, similar manner. Suppose, let's just consider one example. Suppose right now the taxation rate is say 4%. Again, it is hypothetical example. Now suppose in this case, if government decide to increase it to say 40% suddenly, then it will create a problem for the investors. That is why predictability is important in terms of trade. It will provide stability. And it will also ensure fair competition. See, if the rules are transparent, if there is a predictability, then we can ensure fair competition. Otherwise, it will give due advantage to one nation and it will be non-favorable to other nation. For example, if the principle of non-discrimination is not followed, that means one country can be given special treatment. That is why it will not lead to fair competition. So in order to ensure fair competition, we need to make sure that no one is discriminated. We need to make sure that the rules are framed transparently, there is a transparency, there is a predictability. This will lead to economic reforms and development. So these are the trade principles of WTO, that is World Trade Organization. Now, we are going to discuss some of the agreements of WTO, that is World Trade Organization. First is SCM. We are going to discuss them in very brief. First is WTO Agreement on Subsidies and Countervailing Measures. Countervailing measures. This is SCA. Second agreement is GATS. It is agreement for trade in services, general agreement for trade in services. Then we have TRIPS, TRIPS. It is agreement for intellectual property rights, that is trade related intellectual property rights aspects. Then we have TRIMS. This is related to investment measures. And we have AOA, that is agreement on agriculture. Okay. First is SCM, that is agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures. Because subsidies can have trade distorting impact. We are going to understand how subsidies can act as a distortion in the trade fairness in a while. Then there is GATS, that is agreement on trade in services. Then TRIPS is related to intellectual property rights. AOA, that is related to agreement on agriculture, and TRIMS is related to investment measures. So these are major agreements of WTO. Now first and foremost we are going to discuss two major components. One is GATS and second is AOA, that is agreement on agriculture. Under GATS there are four modes of services. It is agreement on trade in services, general agreement on trade in services. Okay. Now first is mode 1. Mode 1 means there is a cross border supply of services. What does that mean? It means the service provider and service receiver are in different countries, and service provider is providing services to service receiver. No one is changing or shifting their countries. So this is cross border, that means through the border the services are provided. For example, Infosys or any IT company which is providing services to say client in USA. The company is situated in India. It is providing services to the clients in USA. No one is shifting their location. They are in their respective countries, and this company, in this particular example say Infosys, is providing services from India to a client in USA. This is cross border supply. This was mode 1. So let me simplify it in this way. Service provider, service receiver, and then service is provided, services provided to receiver. Second mode is mode 2, that is consumption abroad. It means the service receiver and service provider are in different countries. Service receiver is visiting the country of service provider. Service receiver is physically moving to the country of service provider. For example, if someone wants to study in USA, someone from India, is willing to study in USA, or someone from USA is willing to study in India, so in that case they will have to shift to their location if they are physically attending that institution. If they are doing it online, then it will be part of cross-border supply. If they are physically shifting to that particular country for education or for say tourism purpose, a tourist from USA is visiting India, so that will also lead to consumption abroad. That means you are going abroad, you are going to different countries, and then you are consuming the service in that particular country. That is mode 2. Now mode 3, it will lead to commercial presence. Commercial presence. What does that mean? It means the service provider or service receiver, they are in different countries. Now service provider is making its office in the country of service receiver, SP1. Okay, let's consider the same example of say Infosys. So Infosys is now in USA, that means they have office in USA. Another example would be say banks, foreign banks which are having branches in India, or say office of Google India. So Google is a company of USA, it is providing services in India, and therefore they have set up their office in the country of service receiver. That means a company of USA have now their office in India in order to provide services to the people in India. So this is mode 3. Now we are going to discuss mode 4, and it will lead to movement of natural person. What does that mean? It means, suppose any professor from USA is coming to India to deliver a lecture in any Indian institute. Say, let's consider it this way: professor from USA is coming to India to deliver a lecture. After delivering that lecture, the person will again visit their home country. That means they are going to visit India for a short assignment, and after that they will go back to their original country. In mode 3, there was a commercial presence. That means they will have a permanent office in the country of service provider. That means if we were to talk about the example of Google, so their office is permanently in India. So these are mode 4. Mode 1 is related to cross-border supply, mode 2 is consumption abroad, mode 3 is commercial presence. That means the service provider will have a commercial office in the service receiver country. And mode 4 is the movement of natural person. For example, a professor from USA is visiting Indian university or Indian institute to deliver a lecture, or say well-known doctor from India is visiting UAE to conduct a surgery. So that will be example of mode 4 or movement of natural person. So these are the modes of GATS. Now we are going to discuss agreement on agriculture. Before that, let's have a quick recap of what we have discussed so far. So first and foremost, we have discussed WTO, what were the issues related to GATT and how WTO tried to address those issues. So to what extent WTO tried to address these issues, we have discussed it. Apart from that, we have discussed various agreements related to WTO and various trade principles of WTO. Then we have discussed GATS, and now we are going to discuss AOA. So AOA stands for Agreement on Agriculture. on agriculture. So there are three major components of agreement on agriculture. First is export subsidy. Export subsidy or export support. That means the government is providing subsidy or support to the exporters in order to provide a boost to export. Since we are talking about agreement on agriculture, therefore the support is given to farmers. Support is given to farmers. So this is export support. Second major component of this AOA or second major pillar of this AOA is market access. Market access. Now, what does that mean? It means the countries should be able to access the market of another country. Market access in simplest sense means they should be able to sell their product in the market of other country. Third component is domestic support. Domestic support. Domestic support means the government is providing support to the farmers. Now it should be noted that the first component, export support and domestic support, both are providing support. The only difference is that in first case the support is having an objective. Objective is to give a boost to the export. Here there is no such objective. Now this domestic support is subdivided into different components, and this is divided in terms of boxes. First is green box. Support in simplest sense, it means subsidy. Okay, so green box will have those subsidies which do not distort trade. First thing first, let's understand how subsidies can distort trade. So how subsidies can distort trade. Okay, now let's consider two scenarios. One situation is of say country A1, one situation is of country B1. So in order to produce 1 kg of rice, the farmer in A1 requires say 10 rupees. For the sake of understanding, let's keep our calculations in Indian rupee or in single currency. In this case, suppose the farmer require 13 rupees. Now in case of A1, suppose the government of A1 provided a subsidy of say 2 rupees. Here the government provided a subsidy of say 5 rupees. So the net cost in this case will be 10 minus 2, that is 8 rupees. In this case it will be 13 minus 5, that will be 7 rupees. 8 rupees, sorry, that will be 8 rupees. Now we can understand one thing, even though in case of B1 the cost of production was higher, however now if the same product is to be sold in the market, both products will have same price. Had it been without subsidy, then the product of A1 would have received more customer. Why so? Because it was cheaper to produce as compared to product of B1. If we were to consider that both are having same quality. So now let's consider one more example. Suppose instead of 5, the government provided only 2 rupees. In that case, the cost will be 11 rupees, and therefore it will be costly. It will be costly as compared to the product of A1, and now in the international market there will be more demand of product of A1 if the quality is same. That is how subsidies can distort trade. So green box will have those kind of subsidies which do not have trade distorting impact. For example, subsidies given for research and development, R&D. Another component is blue box. Blue box means the subsidies which are given to limit the production. To limit the production. These subsidies will be part of blue box. Again, they will have very low or negligible trade distortion impact. Why so? Because we are limiting the production. The focus is here on limitation of the production. So that will not have trade distorting impact. Third type of subsidies are amber box. These subsidies will have trade distorting impact. That means they are going to provide unfair or undue advantage to those who are providing higher amount of subsidies. So that is why a limitation is imposed on the subsidies under amber box. This limitation is known as de minimis limit. De minimis limit. That means this is the upper limit. Why upper limit? Because if there won't be any upper limit, in that case they will have trade distorting impact. Trade distortion. That means they are going to give unfair advantage to those who are providing more amount of subsidies. That is why a limitation is imposed on the amount of subsidies a country can provide to its population, and this limit is known as de minimis limit. For developed nations and for developing nations, this amount is different. For developed nations, it is 5% of their production. For developing, it is 10% of their production. Countries like India are into this category. So developing nations objected to this limitation or objected to this subsidy ceiling. They said that 10% is not sufficient for us, and we need to provide higher amount of subsidies to our population. And that is how a new concept came into picture. It is peace clause or due restraint. What is peace clause or due restraint? It means developing countries can breach or can cross the de minimis limit in certain circumstances. What was de minimis limit? That means ceiling limit or upper limit. What was that upper limit? So for developing nations it was, so for developed nations it was 5% and for developing nations it was 10%. So peace clause means developing nations can cross this ceiling and they can provide subsidies higher than this 10% limit. It should be noted that our country India was first nation to invoke peace clause. And recently India invoked this peace clause for the third time. Why? Because our rice subsidies crossed the 10% ceiling limit. 10% ceiling limit. So that was all. Now we are going to discuss, or we are going to have two questions. One is, what is GATT? What is GATT? What were the issues related to? What were the issues related to GATT? Second question is, what is agreement on agriculture? What is agreement on agriculture? How agreement on agriculture impose limitations on the food subsidy program of India. So that is your homework, and with this we have completed WTO.